Good morning again to all of you at Her Screen Family Church listening in this Sunday morning, and any others who may be watching this via our website or YouTube. Those of you who have managed to find the time in your busy lives to watch my blog from last week will recall that I addressed the age-old question, where is God in all of this? Where's God? Whilst I am in all of these troubles and difficulties, where's God when I need him most? Where's God when I need his help? Where is he? Well, let me ask you a question first. If God walked right by you, would you recognise him? If he knocked on your front door, would you know it was God as soon as you opened it? I guess not. Why? Because you probably know so little about him. Now, if Boris Johnson was standing there, you'd know who it was straight away. Why? Well, messy blonde hair, a beaming grin on his face, his portly stature, and maybe even a newborn baby in his arms. You've never met him before, but you've heard of him, you've seen photos of him, you're familiar with him, but you hardly know him, do you? In fact, you might even doubt that it is really him. After all, what would the Prime Minister be doing standing on your doorstep? In fact, the only way you're probably going to know for certain is to ask him into your house, sit him down on the sofa and get him to say or do something that only the PM could do. Maybe he could pick up his mobile phone and get the Queen on to have a chat with you. You'd know then that it was the Prime Minister. Where is God? Let me tell you this, he's not hiding from you. He's not keeping his distance because he can't be bothered with you. In fact, just the opposite is true. He longs for you to find him, to get to know him. I just read a few passages of scriptures in which God expresses this. In Proverbs 8 and verse 17, he says, I love those who love me, and those who seek me diligently find me. Those who seek me diligently find me. In Deuteronomy 4 and 29, it says, but from there you will seek the Lord your God and you will find him if you search after him with all your heart and with all your soul. And thirdly, in Jeremiah 29 and verse 13, God says, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. Clearly, God wants to be found by us. But it's not just as simple as knocking on our front door. We have to seek him out. Luke probably put it best when he wrote in the book of Acts and chapter 17 and verses 26 and 27. He said these words, and he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place. Why? That they should seek God and perhaps feel their way towards him and find him. Yet he is actually not far from each of us. Luke is making us understand that the plans of God, that when God made mankind, he determined boundaries that we should live in, countries that we should dwell in. And that in all of these different countries and places, we should seek him, feel our way towards him, find him, although he's not far from each one of us. Now, it conjures up the image of a blind man groping in his darkness, desperately trying to follow the sound of the voice of God, looking for him, seeking him down. And Mark's gospel records just such an incident. So I'm just going to read from the Bible now, from Mark's gospel, chapter 10, and verses 46 through to 52. Then they reached Jericho, and as Jesus and his disciples left town, a large crowd followed him. A blind beggar named Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, was sitting beside the road. When Bartimaeus heard that Jesus of Nazareth was nearby, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." "Be quiet," many of the people yelled at him, but he only shouted the louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." When Jesus heard him, he stopped and he said, "Tell him to come here." So they called the blind man. "Cheer up," they said. "Come on, he's calling you." Bartimaeus threw aside his coat, jumped up, and came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked. "My rabbi," the blind man said, "I want to see." And Jesus said to him, "Go, for your faith has healed you." And instantly the man could see, and he followed Jesus down the road. That's a true story, an event that Mark recorded. Peter and Mark were together, and the story of that healing of blind Bartimaeus got written down in those very early years. And here you have a vagrant, a beggar, sat on the side of the road. No life at all, no hope, no future. We don't know how long Bartimaeus had been there. Maybe all his life. He could have even been blind from birth. We don't know his history. We know that the state he was in here was one of desperate vagrancy, begging, blind, no life at all. But somehow he's heard about Jesus. And he doesn't know Jesus. He's never met him. He certainly can't see him because he's blind. Yet something inside of him, he has faith. And he hears that Jesus is coming by, and he cries out, he shouts out at the top of his voice, and people tell him to shut up. The more they tell him to shut up, the louder he shouts. "Son of David, have mercy on me." Now, God's not deaf. But sometimes we have to shout to get heard. Not because he's deaf, but because that shouting becomes almost an expression of our faith. We rise up, we cry out to God, we call out to God, And God responds to that because he sees the reality of it. It's not, oh, our Father, it's a crying out to God. And that's what Bartimaeus, and Jesus, above the sound of all the crowds, hears this. But then Jesus says something really quite strange. He says, tell him to come here. Tell him to come here. What? But he's blind. Why didn't Jesus go to him? Why does Jesus make life more difficult for him and say, tell him to come to me? Now, this is all a bit about the principle of finding God through seeking. Jesus always said, come to me. He never said, yeah, wait there and I'll come over to you. He always said, come to me, all you who labour, all you who are burdened and heavy laden. And he does the same here, because he wants people to rise up in their faith and come and seek him. That's exactly what Bartimaeus does. Tossing aside his coat. His coat was probably a load of rags, and he probably thought, I'm not going to need this now because Jesus is calling me and my life's about to change. I don't need it. He tosses it aside and he gropes his way towards Jesus, seeking to find where he was, his voice maybe. Maybe the others were leading him by the hand. But in the midst of all of his blind darkness, this blind man finds God. Finds God. And his life is about to change. Because that's what happens. When you find God, your life is about to change. And that's exactly what happened for Bartimaeus. Strangely, Jesus said to him, what do you want me to do for you? What a strange question to ask. Doesn't Jesus see that he's blind? Doesn't Jesus realise that can only be what Bartimaeus wants, surely? But you know, God delights to give us the desires of our hearts, and that's not always evidence. We must ask. We must be precise about asking. Jesus wants us to come and spell out what it is. In fact, on one occasion, Jesus said, you don't have because you don't ask. Ask, and it shall be given to you. Those are Jesus' words. He says, you don't have because you don't ask. Ask, and it shall be given to you. And this coming and this asking and this spelling out of having met with God, he then wants to hear us spell out what it is that we want. And of course, we know the end of the story. Jesus says, go, for your faith has healed you. This man who'd been blind all these years gets up and he can see. Maybe, possibly for the first time in his life. Go, your faith has healed you. All of that darkness, all of that despair, all of that life crippling disease dispelled in an instant. Not because of something that God said or did, but simply because this man believed in Jesus. That's what Jesus says. He says, it's your faith that's healed you. It's not my power. It's not my authority. It's your faith. That's all it takes. It's simple faith. That's the simple gospel. Just believe. Because believing is seeing. Believing is seeing. The blind man believed, and as a result, he could see. Now, I know as well as you do that we live in a world that says actually just the opposite to that, doesn't it? Our modern scientific community has already determined a law by which we must all abide, a law that states categorically seeing is believing, that unless I can see this thing with my own eyes or hear it with my own ears or smell it or touch it or taste it, then I can't believe in it. Well, that may be an understandable position to take regarding worldly affairs, but let me tell you this: when it comes to God, unless you believe, you'll never see. Believing is the first step in seeing. If you're asking the question today, where is God in all of this? Then, like blind Bartimaeus, why don't you throw aside your coat of doubts and fears and begin to call out and find Jesus? Because that'll be the greatest step you've ever taken in your life, a step towards truly seeing. At the end of the life of Job, a man we read about in the Old Testament, a man who suffered enormously during his life on earth, in his final days, he said these words to God, and they're from Job 42 and the first 6 verses. He said, I know, God, that you can do anything, and no one can stop you. You, God, asked, who is this that questions my wisdom with such ignorance? God, it was me. It was me. I was talking about things I knew nothing about, says Job. Things far too wonderful for me. You, God, you said, listen and I will speak. I have some questions for you and you must answer them. And then Job makes this very profound statements. I had only heard about you before, but now I've seen you with my own eyes. Job says at the end of his life, I had only heard about you before, but now I have seen you with my own eyes. And boy, did he believe. You may have heard about God. You may have read about him in Sunday school many years ago. You may know others who seem to know God far better than you do. But would you like to know him for yourself? Well, he's ready and he's waiting for you to begin that journey, even today. Every blessing upon you and your households. Bye for now.